Felicity Eliot, could you, since you are the editor of this nice, from a long time, it started a long time ago. You are responsible.
In 1982.
And you were already in charge, or
no? I wasn't in charge in 1982. I was part of the editorial team right from the beginning, and I wrote and interviewed people. I wrote articles, reports for the magazine, and then I became the co-editor together with Benjamin Creme in 2000. And so I've been the co-editor since then, and since his death I am now the editor. Yes.
And you don't have any co-editor?
No.
No, well, it doesn't.
But I work, of course, with a team. I work in a collegiate fashion.
Could you tell us a little what sort of activity it implies? What sort of responsibility?
Yes. Well, I don't know. People will probably be surprised, but I'm basically thinking about the magazine all the time in the back of my mind, as well as I look at the world events. And so I see everything through a filter of the magazine. And I look at the news, the movement of the news, developments in the world, and I constantly have in mind what we need to put into the magazine and what would be useful for our readers and our subscribers.
So sometimes you receive articles, or sometimes you comment some? Or
yes. Sometimes I ask people to write things. For example, I might see a book that I think looks like a very useful book, and I might commission somebody and ask somebody, perhaps somebody in America or someone in another country, to write a review about something, and I say I would like it for such and such an issue. Perhaps I would say in April I would like it for the July-August issue. And so in this way we work together, and there's an international team of people. So people in various countries are involved in the magazine, and they are the correspondents.
So do they translate what you do, or do they have their own edition?
They write their own. Well, first of all, there are correspondents in various countries, in Japan, in Germany, in wherever the magazine has groups and people are involved. They write articles, or I might ask them to write an article. They send them to me, and we go through a process of editing, proofreading, etc. But they also write their own articles sometimes and report on certain things happening in their countries.
Area. Yeah. So, for instance, if I take this issue, is it exactly what you had prepared in English, or is it a little different?
It depends on the language version. For example, the Slovenians also have a large version like this, but
it's a Slovenian?
There's also in Slovenian, yes, and in Spanish, and Japanese, and so on. The Japanese also have a large edition, but for example, the Spaniards have a small format, but they try to take all the contents that we have in a larger magazine, if it's possible. Partage, as you see, has a large format, and they try to include everything that we have in the English language.
And they might add some certain material?
They don't add material except if it's to do with local
So it's very faithful to the original.
It's very faithful to the, but on these pages here they might advertise their own events in their own country, of course, logically.
Yes. All right. And Julian, how much in what measure are you involved by these activities? As a son of Benjamin Creme, does it mean that you are very much involved, or not so much?
No, very much. I've been involved since the formation of the group in London in 1974.
So you're a pillar.
A pillar, yes, you could say that. Yes, I've been very much involved in different aspects of the work. I do a certain amount for the magazine, but also, for example, in Amsterdam, in the office there, we have a number of computers. I used to work in computing, so I help to maintain the computers. I've been involved in layouts of the magazine, also.
The technical aspect is important for you?
Yes, it's only part of it.
Yes.
Yeah. And I've been involved in informing the public.
Right.
From the start.
From the start.
And how would you qualify the type of relationship you had with your father?
Yeah. That's very interesting. It was a sort of a dual relationship. A two-part relationship, yes. It was both as a family member and as a group member, with my father as Benjamin as the senior disciple in the group. Yeah. Of course, I had one type of relationship, and alongside a family relationship. So it was a dual relationship.
Yes.
Not always easy, but.
Yeah. And you think you have the sort of ability to continue or to continue what your father has done? Have you been? Have you received some sort of inspiration?
Yes, I think, like everybody involved in this work, we are all committed to continuing.
Yeah.
By continuing to produce the magazine, continuing to inform the public, to disseminate the information. So, in that sense, I'm just like all the other people involved.
So let's pass to some more philosophical aspects. You really think that the things will really change in the very near future, or are you still?
No, I believe that absolutely.
I mean, before in the next 10 years, for instance.
I think it has to be within the next 10 years. The planet cannot survive.
Yes.
For any longer than 10 years. The scientific consensus is that the environment will be so degraded, so polluted.
But when Benjamin Creme started his mission, humanity was not so much aware of those problems. Yes, so he didn't have the same criteria to fix the term of the process.
That's true. It's become more and more and more urgent. The ecological situation has become more and more.
But for instance, 40 years ago, he was defining probably the situation in different terms because he didn't have the same references. For instance, the ecological urgency was not that obvious. So he used probably other arguments.
Yes, the ecological situation, the urgency of the ecological situation has become more and more obvious in recent years.
Yeah.
But we have had the problems of starvation in large parts of the world, in Africa, in Asia,
that was
South America.
He had the accent on that before.
Yeah. The thing is, we have to realize humanity as a whole. When I say we, I mean humanity as a whole has to realize that the world belongs to everybody.
Yeah.
And so the resources of the planet should be shared equally among all.
Okay, I ask you more or less the same question. You really think that humanity cannot solve its problems without some sort of external intervention?
Well,
don't you have a sort of belief that humanity can be able to find a solution by itself?
I would immediately say that we have been trying to solve, for example, the issue of hunger for the last, I don't know, 50, 60 years, in fact, since the Second World War. We have been trying to solve the problems that affect Palestine and Israel since the Second World War. We have been trying to find ways to make a lasting peace in various parts of the world.
And we didn't succeed.
And we have not succeeded so far. So far, we have also failed as humanity to implement and create structures which reflect our true needs. Humanity needs to be able to be in right relationship with each other. We need to be able to communicate harmoniously. We need to be able to sit down at a table to negotiate with the Russians, the Chinese, the Indians,
and,
whoever.
Yeah.
What we have also failed to do, also since the Second World War and since its inception, is to change the structure of the Security Council of the United Nations.
Yes.
We need to do this. Now, Benjamin Creme and his master, Anne Maitreya, have talked about the need for seeing the United Nations as representative of the human family. And therefore, we need to give everyone who participates, in other words, every country of the world needs to have an equal voice, not on the basis of power, not on the basis
Security
of the size.
Security Council.
And the Security Council needs to change so that it is a reflection of the reality of each person having the same rights.
For instance,
and that we need to bring down into our everyday life as well, so that the basic needs, United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, Article 25 says that all humanity, every human being, every living creature needs to eat, to be able to sleep and have secure accommodation. It needs healthcare and it needs education. We also need to take care of our planet.
Excuse me, but the problem here, you speak as a reasonable person who, but those are aims that are considered as reasonable by many people, and they don't think they will need a superior intervention to achieve these objectives.
In certain terms, they are right. And I see that there are wonderful experts and very deeply committed people working in the United Nations, working in Médecins Sans Frontières, etc., who continue to say we can do it if we can manage to combine our forces and work together and be active together. We can change things. Now, this is true, and we need to have this approach.
So, for instance, what about that? Don't you see that it's still possible for us to find solutions without expecting without thinking it's really so bad that there is no other solution than an extraordinary intervention?
Well, the thing is, humanity itself has to make the changes. It's not that Maitreya or some external force will intervene and do it for us.
No.
We, humanity, have to make the changes for ourselves.
Yeah.
What Maitreya will do is to articulate for us and make it absolutely clear the direction that we have to go in. He will lead the way, he will show the way, and the masters also will show the way. But we have to do it. Humanity has to decide.
It's difficult to understand these two aspects at the same time, you know. In one way we have to do things, another way we have to trust some other power.
It is not a question of...
Or maybe it's connected with the change of era.
Yes, it is. It's connected with the change of era, as you say. But it is a question of the fact that humanity is now adult enough. We can take responsibility. You see, in the past, we've talked about, for example, for the past 2,000 years, we've talked about a savior, someone who will come to save us. Now it is humanity who is its own savior.
Right.
So we step forward as adult human beings. There is a saying in esotericism, I think perhaps you've heard of it yourself,
maybe,
that when the disciple is ready, the master will come. Now humanity as the world disciple, as the one being that it is ready. largely, I'm not saying that every single person is ready, but largely and enough people are ready to be able to see the need for the changes and to begin to put those changes into effect.
Let's come back to...
Betrayal will stimulate us, encourage us.
I suggest that we consider, for instance, the year 1989, you know, which has been probably felt as important with the bell, but we are...
Great changes
and
in
probably,
Europe, yes.
well, it was more than 20 years ago, but you probably remember.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And
Vividly.
probably at that time, maybe you might have thought already that something would change rather quickly. There were
And it did.
don't you think there were expectations at that moment that things were mature, and maybe they haven't developed as quickly as you expected, for instance.
To a certain extent, that may be true. There seems to be a process of, you move 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Vals.
And every time that humanity seems ready to take a step, there are forces working against it. So, the old energies from the last 2,000 years and the old ways of thinking and acting, separative, divisive ways, they're still very strong. They're losing strength, but they're still very strong.
All right.
And you see in the world people who hang on to the old ways of doing things, and those forces are still very strong.
It might still happen in the future. These forces might also resist and react.
Yes, but in less and less strength.
All right.
The old energies are being withdrawn, and so the old structures are crumbling. The old ways of doing things are having less and less attraction, less and less pull on humanity.
May I add something to that, please?
Yes.
Do. 1989 was an extraordinary year. It was a period of absolute change, watershed for humanity, and you saw enormous changes taking place. This was as a direct result of Maitreya's energy and stimulus working behind the scenes, inspiring people to change.
Sure.
Everything was going very well indeed until we got to 9/11. Now, the American, and there was a sweetening, as we say in English, a sweetening of the atmosphere around the world. People were beginning to see that détente was possible, that negotiation was possible, that we could move together.
Yes, I see.
And there was a definite momentum, gaining speed, gaining strength, and the world was ready for change. You then had 9/11. Of course, we can talk about this, and it's a very interesting issue. However, we know, our information is that Maitreya sent some envoys to the Bush administration at the time to warn them and to say, do not retaliate in kind.
No.
Retaliate in do not retaliate. Avoid conflict. Take your time and see if you can find a wise way to respond. The wiser way to respond would have been, for example, to revoke sanctions, to begin to help nations that were feeling under deep pressure and their populations beginning to suffer. Those sanctions increased the sense of rancor, of resentment and frustration, the sense of marginalization, which is real and also imagined and also created. All of these strata exist in this story. Nevertheless, that Bush administration was advised on how to behave and how to respond. They failed to take the advice. And what we now are reaping in all of our countries, in the citadels of the world, where we thought we were safe, we are now reaping the consequences of that terrible action.
I see.
We also have at the same time the fact that we have failed to implement sharing throughout the world. So you have the whole of sub-Saharan Africa starving.
Yes, you mentioned that yesterday.
I mentioned it yesterday. And there are pockets of the world where there is such deep, deep poverty and malnutrition that children are dying, mothers are dying, pregnancies don't come to term because the mother aborts automatically because the mother is malnourished. This we have failed to deal with. And so we have the migrant crisis, which again was predicted by some of the masters, and Benjamin Creme has said, and his master has said many times, how long do you think the marginalized and dispossessed people of the world, the people with no voice, with no food and no hope, how long do you think they will be willing to be satisfied with nothing and remain in their countries while there is conflict reigning because of precisely these problems? It is a problem of our own making, and we have to deal with it. We have to be realistic, and we have to see that sharing, and when I say sharing, I don't mean some idealistic way of we'll share our tools, we'll share our car from time to time. I mean a structural change, and this is what Benjamin Creme and the Master and particularly Maitreya have talked about for the last 40 years.
But on the other hand, to return to our initial argument, this ecological consciousness goes in the right way. It favors. It's a counterpoint of what happened in the last years.
Yes, the scientific consensus is that the ecology of the planet is almost at a point of no return, where we tip over into a situation that we cannot control.
That's what forces you to say that probably things will precipitate very soon.
Yes. I mean,
and for this ecological problem, humanity is not in the position to find the solution by itself.
Oh yes.
Well, yes.
Because it's too heavy, or I don't know.
No, well, I think we could solve it if we really take seriously the problems that are there. One problem is that there is a very strong voice denying the reality of the ecological problem.
You're ecological skeptical.
Yes, climate change skeptics have a very powerful voice. But I think more and more people are really realizing that there is a problem, and the solution is within our grasp. We can easily implement alternative forms of energy. For example, the Netherlands, the Netherlands where we live, has recently, 1 year ahead of the planned date, achieved 100% renewable energy for running the railways. And there are plans to improve the efficiency of that. Morocco, for example, is a leader in solar power. And in many different places in the world, we see improvements. So humanity can do it.
So I return to you. Could you tell us could you collect all the arguments in favor of a major event to be expected, apart from what we have already mentioned? What are the criteria, astrological or any other argument, which affords you and others to really point that this is the time?
If I understand you correctly, you would like me to enumerate, if I can, and bring together all the possible reasons why I
all
think...
the dossier, the file,
Well,
what is more impressing for you?
Yes, I think it's a total picture. It's the ecological pressure, the urgency of that situation. I think it's the urgency of the situation where you see people desperate to get out of the current political systems that are holding people constricted in such a way that they're forced to choose something that doesn't really match their aspiration and their needs, their practical everyday needs. We see it in every country where there's been recently a referendum or an election. People are suffering because of the political situation, and there is a growing sense that people need to work together on a local level, national level, internationally, bundling their forces, coming together, and that gives me hope. That, together with the ecological pressure, the growth of the voice of the people around the world, as I mentioned.
What else?
And I think that we are seeing at the same time, it goes up and down, of course. It's not a steady line, but we saw in 2008 the economic collapse of the world. And now again, it is so fragile, if I may put it that way. It is something that is capricious in that a leader may, for example, Donald Trump, on one day might have a success, and you see the stock markets go up, the indexes go up, people are feeling optimistic,
euphoric.
etc. But this euphoric, but this is a sort of an unreal world, which is actually based, strangely enough, for a world that talks about money and concrete things, yet it is based on sentiment. It is based on a feeling, something that's actually intangible. And we talk about bullish markets and bearish markets, and the one time it feels strong and the next time it feels weak, and it's an unreal world. It's like a bubble. We see the same kind of bubble to do with estates, to do with property and housing and so on. And this is again artificially kept high. The masses, the ordinary people, when I say the masses, I mean the ordinary people. People can't afford homes. People are being put out of their homes. So there is a combination of a number of factors, actually almost numberless, and all of these are coming together now, I believe, to quite a crucial point.
But my problem is here that if we consider the whole 20th century, there have been a lot of moments which were also very critical. We could even, I don't know, at the time before the Second World War, I mean, there were other moments of maybe more critical in a certain way than what we live, what we have to experience today.
Yes, I agree. On the other hand, there's one more factor which I was about to talk about, and that is the question of peace and of the armaments industry. And at the moment, the world is living under increased tension, consciously or unconsciously, because of what is happening with North Korea, America, and a number of other countries, where we get countries such as, and it is a shame, it is to our great shame and disgrace, we provide countries, for example, like the UAE, and various countries, we provide them with arms.
Excuse me, once more. For instance, 1945.
Yes.
When with Hiroshima, etc. It probably was also quite impressive for your father-in-law.
Yes, absolutely.
I think there were really moments where people had very, very strong reasons to believe it was a great danger. And finally,
similarly with Kennedy at the time of Cuba.
So finally, no other atomic catastrophe occurs in the last 70 years, you see.
Yes.
So it's always a temptation to collect events which are just occurring and giving them importance which might be disproportionate comparatively to other moments in the last decades or in the last century.
Yes, I understand perfectly what you're saying, and all of those were moments and which have a particular explanation and place in the information given by Benjamin Creme. In 1945, in fact, it was that in that year that Maitreya decided that he himself would come into the world rather than working, because it was so crucial.
Interesting, yes.
Yes, and it was felt that humanity had suffered sufficiently that we might, terrible suffering for all.
With the Shoah,
but unfortunately it wasn't the whole of humanity, and some parts of the world hadn't suffered enough, as it were. And so we gradually got back into the 50s and the 60s, back into a kind of materialism. We left the world behind us. Once we had put the Marshall Plan, the best thing that America had done so far.
Sure.
And I have to tell you, that is one of the aspects of this story now, is that we are waiting for America to express that higher nature that we saw in the Marshall Plan.
Sure.
But of course you need a leader, and you need a catalyst, or you need someone to voice, as Julian was saying, to articulate for humanity those needs.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to the whole picture that is underlying all these events and the whole progress of history, is the fact that humanity, man, is a divine being, potentially. We are all in potential divine. We are souls in incarnation, and as souls we are divine. And so it is necessary for the evolution of humanity that we express that divinity.
Yeah.
Express that divine nature. And on the most basic level, the first step of that is to implement the principle of sharing in international affairs, so that everybody, every man, woman and child, has at least the basic essentials for a dignified life: adequate food, shelter, healthcare, education.
Another question, I hope it will not embarrass you, is the relationship you might have with other movements which have the same analysis, or more or less the same analysis. I mean, I know sometimes people prefer to stay in their own sphere and say, well, what the other people do is not important, but still you are not the only one to have a certain type of discourse. I mean, I don't want to give some names, but I mean, it's not it's not unique. So, do you have any possibility of connection, of dialogue with other groups, other movements?
I can't talk about what's happening here in France because I simply don't know the situation in France. Yeah. Where we live in Amsterdam, there is more contact, especially in the last few years, with other societies, such as the society which was founded by Madame Blavatsky, a disciple who worked with the Masters, the Theosophical Society. So there's more contact with them. But I can tell you something about when Benjamin Creme first started working. He tried to make contact with other groups, other like-minded, or what one would broadly call spiritual groups. And what we have found over the time, not only in Holland but in various countries, is that once a spiritual group or a group based on some sort of aspiration or idealism, they tend to wish to maintain and keep to their own way of seeing things and doing things quite naturally. Yeah. And I have no comment about that and no criticism of that. That's their way, but we are not the only group who's working in an idealistic way based on these ideals. However, we are unique in the fact that we say that Maitreya, the world teacher for all humanity, is in the world now and is coming out into the world for all humanity, not this spiritual group or that religion or that political party, whatever. He is someone who is above all of those, because the ageless wisdom teachings is in fact that body of knowledge and wisdom which substands, which actually informs the various religions, etc. So we're unique in that. We say that there is a world teacher. in a physical form.
So you mentioned Blavatsky. She has been mentioned, like Alice Bailey. Where does it come from? I mean, what? No, I mean,
is the origin?
No, the origin of this interest. Is it Benjamin Creme who has connected, not in the space but in the time? He thought it was necessary to connect himself or his movement to these previous processes, previous
I wouldn't put it like that.
Literature.
No. All of these disciples have worked under the guidance and inspiration of a master. And Benjamin Creme is also one or other, yes.
And this master has also intervened with former people.
It may have been that master or another master who worked behind them and through them and inspired them, but you might want to say something more?
All the masters cooperate between themselves. I've lost the thread of what you were saying.
When I read this research, I thought this interest, this mention, these references, this bibliography. Why did he felt necessary to introduce it in his own production?
Yes. Well, he was a student. He as a young man, he was a student of the teachings of Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and others. Many different teachings. He read widely.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, he became aware that he was in telepathic contact with his master. His master contacted him.
That's it.
At first he wasn't aware of it, but gradually
that's it.
he learnt that he could contact. He could be in contact with his master. So from that point onwards, he was trained by his master to do a particular work. The masters have disciples in all fields of endeavor throughout the world, and they do their work through their disciples. And Benjamin was just one of many. He had a particular job to do, a particular task, and that was to inform, to bring to the public the information.
So he was continuing what had been started by those philosophical people.
Absolutely, yes.
And what about his interest for the precessional eras, for the zodiacal eras, etc.? When did he decide to connect what he said to this astrological chronology?
It's not a question of deciding to connect it. It is simply a background too, and it is part of the movement of our planet through the solar system, which comes into different alignment with different constellations, and these energies. Our planet is bombarded every day with great energies pouring into the planet. These are from the solar system, and from outside the solar system. And Maitreya, as a great being, can guide and direct these energies where they're needed, in the potency they're needed.
But in that specific case, it is obvious that there are a lot of people who are interested by this change of era, Aquarius age. It is not at all. I mean, this is to continue.
Unique to us.
No, from this point of view, this is certainly not unique.
No, it is
a lot of people
fact.
are thinking and commenting
absolutely.
this process of change of Aquarius age, etc.
Yes.
This is from this point of view, you belong to a constellation of different movements who are giving importance to this astronomical phenomenon.
Yes, but the thing is, groups of all kinds, they tune into the same ideas, you know. If you read the teachings, you have definite conscious knowledge of what's going on. But if you don't read the teachings and live them, there's still the possibility of tuning into the ideas.
Yeah.
And we heard in the 60s, the musical Hair talked about the dawning of the age of Aquarius. They were tuning into the idea,
They don't have the right content in certain way. I mean, they don't know what's going to happen really. In fact. Because many people project different things about this same calendar, but maybe it may be not relevant.
Yeah. That's right. But what is more relevant to humanity at this moment is the reappearance of a teacher, the appearance of a teacher in the world, which is part of a cyclic event. It's something that happens cyclically every few hundred or 2,000 years, and there's a whole long line of teachings going back to the Buddha, Krishna, Shankaracharya, Mithra, Hermes, and so on. So, the appearance of a teacher to lead humanity.
So that's to be expected, or it doesn't yet come.
Well, humanity, yes, Maitreya is in the world now.
Yeah.
But he still has to emerge publicly, fully, more publicly.
So to end this very interesting interview, it has been mentioned television as a trigger process. I mean, something will happen with television, some sort of miracle will telepathical, it's very technical at the same time. So. Could you give more content to this scenario?
Yes. What Benjamin described is that when humanity is ready and responding to the ideas of Maitreya is emerging gradually into more and more public. Incognito so far, not known as Maitreya, known as Mr. So-and-so, whatever. But his ideas about sharing, about the need for looking after the planet, and so on,
have already an effect.
As more and more people respond to these ideas in the right ways and say, yes, that is what we must do, that is what we want, he will be able to declare himself to the world for who he is. And on that day, the television networks of the world will be linked up, so we will all see him on the television.
This will be a sort of coup d'etat. I mean, in system, the television will not be master of their own programs in a certain way.
No, people will be warned beforehand.
No, there will be
to tune in if you want to.
It will be arranged beforehand. So on such and such a date and time, this person will speak to the world.
It will be a rendezvous.
Yeah, it'll be arranged beforehand. Everybody will be alerted that this will happen, and we will all hear him speak to us
in our own language.
In our own language, telepathically.
Yeah.
The television is simply a check, a control, so that we all know that person who we see on the television is the one who is speaking to us.
Yeah.
It's not necessary. Even if you're not in front of the television, you will still hear him.
So Benjamin Creme receives this information.
Yes.
Exactly. He's conveying this information.
Yes.
So how does he receive? How did he receive the information? And another question: do you think he will still be active after his death in a certain way?
Yeah, to answer the last question first, yes, very much so. I was quoting it this morning. There is in the teachings of Alice Bailey, through the master Joel Kuhl, a Tibetan master, has written that in the circumstance of an Aquarian type of group, which this is, with an Aquarian type of founder of a group, once the person dies, simply because they are not physically present, it does not mean that they end their association with the group.
No.
So I assume, and it is my sense that this is correct, that Benjamin Creme continues to be involved although he's not physically present, he continues to nurture, to be interested in, to sustain the group in every way he can, from a point of view of not being physically present, being dead, but nevertheless.
Another point which I've just discovered, his father was a Jew, wasn't he?
Correct.
He came from a Russian Jewish family.
So do you think it's important? Because there is a tradition of many people coming from the Jewish area have a certain mission, like Jesus or something. Do you think it was important for him?
I would say
to be a Jew or not?
I would say it was irrelevant.
Irrelevant.
On the other hand, it makes him a very interesting man. He's half Irish.
Yeah, I know.
His mother was
Yeah.
Irish.
His
That's
mother
what
was
you wrote,
Irish,
yeah.
and he had a Jewish father. I agree with Julian. In a certain sense, it's completely irrelevant because
okay.
most people who have reached a certain point of evolution anyway see themselves as citizens of
Yeah.
the world. Just as Maitreya, and this is a very important point, I
Yes.
believe, Maitreya has in him he is so broad in his appeal that he could be a man of the north, a man of the south. He would fit in the west, he would fit in the east. He appeals to all people, and in that teacher, each person will see their ideal and see what they are hoping for.
I think you look like your father a little. Don't you think so?
Many people say we look.
Yeah. So. Yes, I understand that.
And, you know, most of us these days feel as if we're citizens of the world. We belong to this planet, and we already have interest in other planets, so it is not so parochial or so limited.
The thing is, our genetic makeup and the traditions from which we are born really has nothing to do with us, ourselves as souls.
Yeah. We can say that if we would meet in 10 years, in the next 10 years, a lot of things would have happened.
Yes.
And you would be very disappointed if it were not that way.
I don't know if I would be disappointed, but I would be very surprised, I think.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Very nice couple.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed. It's very kind of you.